Yeah. So today, this is the last of this series.
Series.
Yeah, you know, the, La could have had it. There was a time. I think it is something which we don't have now. That where Doordarshan used to come with this 13 episodes, once a week, and so 13 week is 3 months. And then it will be renewed for another 13 weeks, 26 weeks, like that, 52 weeks. But now I guess the serials concept has changed. People go up to 500, 700 episodes every day, 5 days a week. And if you look at the likes of Netflix, they will go for this one day, they will release all 10 episodes, and then you sit down and see all 10 hours. Anyway, so the point I'm trying to say is that this is the 13th episode and we're getting close. So some way reminding me of those, the Doordarshan days. So this is the infrastructure.
For your information, many in English serials have 13 episodes as a season. You're finishing a season.
Still today, huh?
Yep.
Okay, good. Oh yeah, so this the season is getting over. So so infrastructure is the last segment I thought I will pick up. The reason is, it is very important in many ways. One is the, outside of agriculture, and we discussed it before, and if you take out transportation sector, where a large part of the activity is also infrastructural activity. The third largest employer of the country is the infrastructure sector. Second is infrastructure is core to the development of economy for any country. Without infrastructure, your the engine doesn't even start. Infrastructure is actually a sort of loose term. Anywhere where you are creating assets which will survive for a long period of time. Usually it is told, which is more than a year. And other term, which is used, not necessarily 1:1 relationship, but capital expenditure. Whenever there is a capital expenditure which create an asset which will survive for a long time, beyond 1 year, multiple years, that is what is called the infrastructure. So anything which you see around us, whether it's a road, it's a building, airport, railways, the factories, the oil rigs, everything is in a way, everything is part of the infrastructure sector. So if you expand that way, that, the railways is, for example, employing around 15 lakh people. But at any point of time, couple of lakhs of those people are actually building railway tracks or repairing railway tracks or building stations or some other facility. So they are building infrastructure. Same way if you look at airlines, aviation sector or oil and gas sector or manufacturing sector, there is always a significant number of people who are building. Even if you look at our own university, there is a team of, I think, 150 people. And there are, I'm sure, multiple of that who are contractors who are constantly building, repairing, and working on those lines. So while all 2000 normally will be saying are in education sector, but if you split it, you will find 200 to 300 are part of infrastructure. So infrastructure is a very, very large, employer. Second unique thing about infrastructure is very large number of unskilled labor. People who probably don't have a college degree and are not doing a job which requires a very specific training. I'm not saying that the people in infrastructure are incapable in their job, but normally if you look at somebody who is in the plumbing, they will take probably a training from ITI at times, may not take any training whatsoever, and then learn on the job. So unlike many other so-called quote unquote white collar jobs, infrastructure jobs employs a huge number of people who are semi-skilled, unskilled, and who earn relatively less amount of money. So it's a large generator of employment in the country for the people who otherwise, without an employment, will essentially collapse completely. And I am saying this because some of these issues which we are seeing today, that migrants are, trying to go to their home state, there are thousands of them on the roads walking. Large part of that is because the infrastructure project has stopped. And since they get salary once a week, sometimes once a day, and since their employers have suddenly run out of cash, anyway, infrastructure sector is a place where they are perennially out of cash, and we'll explain why that situation is. And they don't have much of savings. They have, if they are not from the place where they are working, and which is not the case in majority of the, if there is a construction next to my home, people like you and me will not be in the construction area. People will come from some other place because, the payments that they will be receiving is probably a fraction of the people in the neighborhood, right? So you have to bring cheaper labor, and these are the people who suddenly got caught and now they want to go back, sometimes to their state which is far away, sometimes to neighboring states, sometimes to another city or village, whatever. But this is a very important context. So from the government perspective, if you look at whenever the government wants to push money in the economy, whenever you talk of government will invest, of course, there are two large investments government does. One is it pushes money in the financial sector because, if the financial sector is unstable, then the whole country will collapse. So if there is a significant amount of bad debt or write-off that happens, the banks become weak, then of course government refinance those financial institutions. That is one part. But the other investment, other money push, which government will typically do whenever they are into, trying to make intervention in the economy, both from growth perspective or pushing money to the people, is uh, uh, is infrastructure sector. Because the moment you put money to build something, one is that you are creating an asset which will stay with you. And the second is a large number of people who otherwise are in relatively not so affluent situation will get an income. Holly, sit down. My dog has joined. Just hold on. I have to just put her out. Sorry. So that is where infrastructure plays a very important role. And if you see out of this lockdown, when government started opening up the economy, the first area, apart from the liquor shops, which is reason is primarily the states are starving and they don't have enough money and they want to have some quick cash. The other segment which was opened up first is the infrastructure sector. So let's move on. So these are, of course, the areas which we covered. We covered almost 11 plus areas, and that's how we are on the 13th so-called episode. This is the infrastructure definition. If you look at water supply, sewage, industrial centers, whatever is being built around you physically, this excludes the digital infrastructure. Is what is part of this particular industry. There is another term which we use, which is the EPC. You always hear this EPC contractor, right? So it stands for engineering, procurement, and construction. L&T, for example, is EPC contractor. So these are the, largely it means a private sector company which take up a large scale and complex infrastructure project. It can be, commissioned by the government, or it can be commissioned by a private entity also. For example, tomorrow, if we want to build a new campus, then we might appoint one of these infrastructure companies like Gammon India, whatever, or L&T, which is the largest. That is a EPC contract. So what they do is, why the term coming, that they actually do the design, the engineering part, then procure. They actually get all the components. So if it is a physical infrastructure in terms of building, they will be buying the cement, the sand, the gravels, then the electrical components, the paint, everything, and then do the construction and hand it over to you. Now, this is, so if you look at the country's infrastructure activity, there are three broad buckets. Okay, one is the people building their own structure. I mean, either to use it themselves, like we are building our own infrastructure. We are adding a new building. We may buying the raw materials and building it. Now, when the COVID sort of situation happened, we stopped it. We can wait, and probably the impact is, except for those people who suddenly become jobless, the impact is minimal. However, there is a set of people who are building such infrastructure with their own investments to sell, right? So if you look at, especially, you will find these commercial builders and the people who are building the commercial property and the housing properties. All these builders, at least in Bangalore, the Prestige and all of them. So they take huge project. A normal model is that they will ask the buyers to put 20%, and with that working capital, they will build the base, up to the ground level, and then ask another 10%, and then build 2 more floors, and then another 10%, and 2 more floors, and ultimately they will build the whole structure, and 90% of the money they will get and hand over and ask for the remaining 10%. So these are the guys who are in deep trouble. I was just hearing one CNBC report that some 700,000 houses across the country are in various phases of completion. And the suggestion by the expert is that if you are somebody who is planning to buy houses, your own house or commercial place, wait, because it is expected that the prices of the such properties will reduce by 20%. So these guys, the builders, are now stuck. They have taken loan from somebody. They were expecting that they will complete and hand over and take the remaining portion of the money. That is not coming. Second is the people, that is not coming because they are not able to build anything more. They would have built something more and asked for the another 10% of the amount. Now they are not able to do. They were holding some unsold property and were thinking as they make the construction, it will be visible and people will come and buy. That now they are not able to sell because they are, people like you and me will be waiting for prices to fall now. And the third thing is that people who have already bought, okay, may start, already bought, that is not their problem directly, but may start, and if they have taken loan from somebody else, which is a bank, or they have sort of done some agreement with the builder itself that I'll be taking possession and I'll be paying you in some sort of installment, maybe EMI or another 10% after 6 months or whatever. Those people are slowly getting into a situation that they are not able to pay the future commitments. So if it is direct deal with the builder, then builders are suffering. If it is banks who are suddenly going to have a lot of this property on their books, they will stop giving new loans to people to buy. So the real estate segment, which people who are into the building of commercial and residential property, are absolutely in bad shape. Second category of construction that happens is the government doing their own construction. So that we have the Central Public Works Department, CPWD. State also has their PWD, Public Works Department. Each municipality has their own construction arm, like Mumbai municipality or Bangalore municipality, and they do their road construction, typically road repair and all those sort of stuff. Of course, they work through contractors. They are in a relatively good position because end of the day they are the government, right? So government is, they will be the last one to fall. And third one is this EPC contractor. So the normal EPC contractors, the way it works is that, since it is large project, it has some complications. First of all, these projects, whether it is done by the government, like suppose government is setting up building a national highway, okay, for say 10 kilometers, and each kilometer costs say 15 crores, so 150 crore project. So now government will typically get into something called a PPP, public private partnership. So there will be some, many of the cases, these EPC contractor themselves will become a partner and say, you know what, I am building this, the cost is 80 crores, you pay me 60 crores, and remaining when the, cost is 150 crores, but you pay me 100 crores, and remaining 50 crores, what we'll do is, once the construction is over, we'll collect some toll. Okay, and I will take a share of the toll, or first 5 years, whatever toll comes our way, I will take it, right? And how do these EPC contractors fund their, the remaining 50 crores which they are putting from their pocket? They typically take a loan. So that is one case, PPP sort of model where the EPC contractor themselves are involved. There may be a second case where they themselves are not involved in building the, in doing the PPP part, but they are dependent on government and another entity which has gone into an agreement with the government to form a PPP model, private public partnership, who have created a model where the payment to this builder, EPC contractor, the contractor will come only when the facility is up and running and they start collecting some sort of revenue, right? And that revenue flow doesn't happen. So even if the EPC contractor has not been a part of, revenue sharing after the completion, they are still caught because the people who are supposed to give them the payment based on revenue sharing are also running dry, right? So and so today, if you look at a large player like L&T, and a few days back we had this session with some of these people who came from this infrastructure sector. CDC had this session. You would have heard that they are in great trouble because one is they have thousands of crores which they have invested in building various infrastructure which have not suddenly come to a standstill. Second is, even if they can complete it tomorrow, they have no clue whether they will be paid by the people who are involved, whether it is government directly, very rarely, or government plus some other entity who has created some sort of partnership. Because even if the infrastructure is ready, the infrastructure usage is in question. You may have a road but nobody is using, or you may have a building but nobody is buying. Then how do you get your money out of it? And on the top of that, they have now got into the third trouble, that all their laborers, the migrant laborers who form the backbone of construction industry, are now going away. And those 70-80% of the people may not be skilled, but the people, there are 20-30% of the people who are highly skilled in electrical work, plumbing work, painting work, and very difficult to replace. And the very fact that they have gone for migrant workers and not local workers, there are reasons of three. One is, the local workers are costlier. Local workers will do much more political interference and start demanding many more things which migrants don't do. And third is, local workers also don't have the skill because they have not been working in this segment for a long time. You have seen in newspaper, the Bangalore, Karnataka doesn't want migrant workers to leave, because if all the migrant workers who are probably doing construction in Bangalore, which is largely from Eastern India, are gone, the locals cannot, even if you pay them double the money, they cannot do it because they have not been doing it for years, right? So these EPC contractors and the people who are doing their properties for the commercial, residential context are now in great trouble. Now, what they can do, we'll come back and discuss a little bit. But before that, this is the infrastructure, sector per se. You have seen the national highway, especially with this BJP government, which came in 2014. They are doing a very ambitious target and implementation under Mr. Nitin Gadkari. So we are seeing a huge increase in national highway construction over the years. But having said that, the total road in the country is 700,000 kilometers. The national highway is only 96,000 kilometers. But nevertheless, it's the most expensive construction, so that drives a lot of demand. And there are the other sectors also, all of them, some amount of growth which you have. And there is some other data, but I want to bring your attention to on the right side that even before COVID, this is a very risky business to be in. First is that you have a long gestation. You start and your project will be over in 5, 7, 10 years. Second is, there is a lot of this social, political, geographical uncertainty. You might suddenly find that local levels don't want to work, something happens, the political scenario changes, or, uh, somebody starts, you may sack one individual who is from the local village, the whole village decides to boycott you, and 3 months there will be no work, right? Which is not something you face in a city environment. You may, go across, you may have assumed that your, road will be built on a surface which has, 10 feet of soil, but suddenly you find that you are suddenly having the hard rock within 2 feet. Then you have to use much more expensive equipment to build your structure, which you never really planned. Government, large part is government, at least for the large projects. A lot of uncertainty, delay, red tapeism. At times there are issues with the payment and everything. If you have fight with government, nothing you can do, because government is end of the day, the sovereign power it has. And the labor availability, it is a perennial problem. Contrary to our popular belief, getting labor is very, very difficult for construction industry, because the people who have come to work for construction industry, they are little different from laborers which are appointed, say in brick making facility, or where the people are working in non-urban setting. So large part of the infrastructure in the country are either in the urban and peri-urban areas. So the violations of the basic rights is not very easy to do, first of all. So so you cannot, it's a good thing, but from the perspective of the infrastructure builders, that they cannot get away easily with a very bad practices. The laborers demand and many times get good facility, and if they don't get it, they can easily switch to somewhere else in the same city without much of associated cost. So they have to, unlike if they are doing a the village panchayat is building a bunch of toilets, and you have a labor, and if you don't want to work in that village panchayat, you have to go to another village which may be 30 kilometers away. But here in Bangalore, you don't want in one place like Mahadevpura, or in Calcutta, you don't like in Taliganj, you can go to Baliganj and start working. So labor availability, especially in the urban areas, is very difficult. And that 20-30% of the labor which is very talented and which has the skills are very, very reasonably expensive, and you have to really make sure that they don't go away. And the other thing about the migrant workers is that they typically come from the same village or same locality, so they form a group because they are in a different area altogether, away from their home, and they take collective decisions. So if you suddenly decide to fire one individual, you might suddenly find 50 people have left because they are from the same village. So that is a little bit tricky in terms of handling the labor. So it is already a tricky business to be in, wafer thin margin, a lot of corruption, a lot of interference, a lot of difficulty in getting payments. On the top of that, COVID has actually closed down everything, and 2-3 segments, as we discussed, are in grave trouble. This is so there is the standard. So I wanted to spend a little bit of time now. Now the work has started, and everybody's saying we'll do this, safe way. If you hear, Mr. Gadkari was giving an interview a few days back saying that, we'll have this social distancing, we'll have this mask wearing, we'll have, sanitization, and we'll start the infrastructure projects. Now, the good part of infrastructure project is that unlike many white collar activities, infrastructure project, more or less is quite amenable to have physical distance, because people work in a very large space and they can maintain that, except for certain times when they are coming to work, or they are going for eating, or they are, you know, going back. But space is usually not a constraint. But nevertheless, there is this process probably we all have to define. And I sort of took one diagram. I just wanted to show this. This is what, we have built, something similar as a, I was talking to some of you that will build a journey map of a person who is going to an infrastructure project site, and how probably we can, have a process to ensure that they are not, unduly getting exposed or exposing others to COVID plus sort of positive sort of situation. So, where the person checks. Now, a lot of it is probably may not be very easy because of the type of business investments involved, type of literacy people have. But say the person is, feeling sick in the morning. So instead of landing up, he may, and this is the things which you have to create, because if he says, if you don't come, you'll not get any money, what the laborer will do is that they will take some paracetamol, even if they are feeling very, very sick. They will land up at the workplace. They will not be caught by the, even if you use a thermometer, and they will, infect a lot of people if they are infected themselves. So these are very tricky thing. If somebody calls up and says that, I am feeling sick, will you say that now, I will not take your labor support anymore. You can, be at home and lose your day's salary, or I will say that I'll pay you 50%. Now, these are things the construction industry has to think through. I think a lot of it, people will, refine over a period of time. But for sure, these are the ideal conditions, that he checks that he is feeling sick, he doesn't go, but he is feeling okay. There is a transport provider. Before getting into the bus, you are checked for temperature. If there is a temperature is, uh, you know, there is an issue, then you again, uh, are sent back and to home. Otherwise, you come to office again. At the gate, you are checked, and then you work, wear a mask, use sanitizer wherever you are going, wherever you are supposed to work. Stay away, don't come too close to each other, wear a mask all the time, use sanitizer time to time, go only to places which is, other places to work, or canteen or food court. Don't go to, don't play games, don't go to common room, don't hang around social gathering, and once the work is over, go home. So, every place based on whatever they have, I'm sure this is a very, very ideal situation. You cannot have it, but then within the constraint of the space, it cannot be 100% effective. But many can, one thing everybody can do with masks available for 28 rupees, 25 rupees, the 3 layered mask that is available right now. Even in Bangalore, so I'm sure people can make it for 15 rupees, and they can give it to the employees. Maybe it's additional cost, but it's worth it. Or hand sanitizer. These are the sort of things. Don't crowd around. Don't hang around. Whenever you are sitting, canteen, mark the chairs so that they are not very close to each other. These are sort of things. A lot of it can be done. Now we are only reducing the percentage of propagation. We probably can never make it 100% foolproof, but as you reduce it, the chances of many people getting affected simultaneously is reduced. Then infrastructure, while all of this is there, one thing that has happened in infrastructure sector, and we have discussed it in manufacturing segment also, that suddenly everybody is, the supply chain has collapsed. Somebody has stopped working, cement company has stopped working, and then even if they're working, no loading, unloading people are there. Even if loading is there, then there is no truck driver. If there is truck driver, then you don't have train. Your train, then again, you don't have, somebody to bring it from the, that train, whatever the unloading point, I think it's called some head, the train head, or I forgot, freight head, from there to your factory. So now you look back or with, again, a supply chain, find out who are the suppliers who can, be more dependent, who are closer to you, maybe a little more expensive, but closer to you, with whom should you have only one supplier or multiple suppliers, so that at least you can have a fallback option. Constantly look at the data, and assess the legal and financial implications. See, right now, this force majeure, the act of God, people have, it's not very clear still today whether, COVID is the act of God situation, right? So the people are thinking that, people are anticipating huge amount of legal cases will happen. People will be asking for force majeure sort of thing, and the others will refuse. But nevertheless, understand what sort of similar situation, may not be this magnitude, but similar situation, or at least in the next, even if it is next 1 year, what are the sort of financial implications, what sort of insurance I can take, how do I manage that, my brand is not affected, how do I always communicate to people proactively rather than being, slapped with the notice and then I coming out and saying I can't do your job. So those are things which is expected to be looked after, and this is of course the last slide with some amount of reading and all. So net infrastructure segment is badly affected, but within that, people who have been building on their own infrastructure, they are a little more protected. Wherever the government is spending its own money, the PWD, CPWD, the municipality, they have sort of less affected. Of course, they have asked their contractors to stop working, but then the crisis is not as deep. The crisis is definitely very deep for the people who have been building commercial and household projects. For in multiple ways it has got stuck. People have stopped buying, people have stopped paying. They are in dire need of cash right now. They are not able to complete handover, and this is in a total mess. The other is EPC contractor, because if they have gone into a model where they will take a share after completion, then they are doomed. Even if they have not done, many of the cases, if it is not just government, but there is a private entity involved in the the consumption side, they will again get affected any which way. And they have entered a huge amount of uncertainty, because they have, they every day, if you don't use earth mover, there is a cost, right? You don't use your raw material. If you keep cement for some time in the open, it will solidify, right? So there are a lot of things which is there. If you have dug some place and then expecting it to fill it up with concrete, and if you have not done, it will get filled up. So they are into probably the weakest spot at this point of time, and there is a lot of thinking that what sort of support government can give, because if some of these large companies like Gammon India or L&T or Stoop, I think not Stoop, but these are the guys. If they collapse, the economy will be in deep trouble. Let me tell you, because likes of L&T are the only one who can build in this country nuclear power plants. Not even CPWD can do. And if they can't do it, the complex cryogenic storage plants, the storage, storage devices, right? So this will be an area for government to make sure they don't collapse. So there have been suggestions that we should give a sovereign guarantees to all sort of loans, so the lenders don't start pushing them, give back my money, give back my interest. Maybe government should give them, the lenders, the interest payment for some time, or allow some sort of liquidity, so that they can manage without getting interest being paid. Similar way, the government has asked individuals that you can take a moratorium of your EMI payment for a few months. The good thing is that it is one of the first to start working. It is relatively safe, I would say, in terms of social distancing norms, but the challenge is majority of the people are from the underprivileged section of the society, so they are very keen to work, but they may not easily understand all the nuances of protecting and stuff, and they don't have the facilities also. And a lot of labor has gone back and continue to go back. So getting the right quality labor to start will be difficult, but then if some of these fundamentals can be managed, it can start faster than many other industry. It has already started, at least in the road building and all. It has started in quite a big way. So that's it. So I stop here. This is it. I stop sharing, and